His was the only boat to arrive.
I think maybe it was a cow. I don't know.
There's the thank you letter from Lyndon Johnson.
There was even a monorail at one point to the east of us.
Plus, everybody forgets about pirates.
This is the coolest field trip I have ever been on.
I don't know, but I've been told, keep on dancing, won't ever get old.
Hello, and welcome to the Long Island History Project. This is the podcast that brings you stories and interviews with people passionate about Long Island history. You can hear them all at longislandhistoryproject.org. My name is Chris Kretz, and I am your host, and our opening music is courtesy of the Homegrown String Band. Today we come to praise the public library local history librarian, those unsung heroes of the back room, lone arrangers, diligent researchers, digitizers, oral history interviewers, microfilm jockeys, display impresarios, postcard wranglers, keepers of the arcane knowledge of old storefronts and streets with no name. We've spoken to a few in the past, and it is a job for those with a real passion, a real eye for detail, a keen curiosity, all attributes readily apparent in today's very special guest.
My name is Natalie Korsavidis. I'm the local history librarian / archivist at the Farmingdale Public Library.
Okay, and Natalie, first of all, thank you for joining us today over Zoom. We'll talk about many things, I'm thinking, but in terms of Farmingdale history, I love it when towns or villages or places have secret earlier names. That kind of reveals a deeper past. What is Farmingdale's original name?
It was originally named Hardscrabble.
What, and is there, other than the conditions, is there a story behind that, or?
We don't really know the story, how it got named Hardscrabble, I think beyond the conditions, but when a gentleman named Ambrose George moved here, he decided he didn't like that name, and he's the one who changed it to Farmingdale.
And that was somewhere in mid-1800s, I'm guessing?
I would say probably, because we incorporated in 1904, so it had to have been as Farmingdale, so it had to have been the 1800s. Two of the streets in Farmingdale are named after his wife and daughter, so he had impact.
It's good to be there at the beginning. You can pick the names.
But I just did learn in 1836, about 200 members of Farmingdale petitioned to change the name to Bethpage, because Bethpage at the time was named Central Park. But Central Park was also petitioning to change the name to Bethpage, and they won.
I've heard this story, a version of that story a couple times, and it seems like, we talk about Ellis Island, the people there changing the names of immigrants. It sounds like the post office had a big hand in renaming or determining names on Long Island when you read the stories.
They had to, they actually, William Wesh, which was the village clerk, actually had to send the petition to the post office to get the name changed. And I guess we were late in doing it, so Central Park had done the petition first, and that's the reason they got the name versus us.
So give us a geography lesson. Situate Farmingdale in geographically, politically, what county and all that kind of stuff.
So we were originally obviously Queens County, because before Nassau County got created, but we are on the south shore of Nassau County, but there's a little tiny part of us that are Suffolk County, so we're right on the border.
I guess you wouldn't say you're mid-island, but you're not literally on the shore. No,
we're not really. Yeah, but we're, a town or two away from the beach.
Okay. And I did an interview about the Hempstead Plain. So you were the eastern edge, would you say, of that vast prairie?
And I think so. Yeah, we caught a little bit of it. We are mostly, obviously, because of the name, farmland, but I think we were a little bit of it.
Was it a farming community mostly, would you say?
Yeah, it was. I mean, even all the way up to, from what I understand, the 40s and 50s, there was nothing but farmland in many places, mostly around Route 110, which is also known as Walt Whitman Road, I think. And then it changes its name depending where you are on 110. But that was a lot of farmland. And then Hempstead Turnpike, there was a lot of farms there.
So Farmingdale Public Library, you're the local history librarian. How long have you been doing that?
Now you're going to make me think. I'm going to say probably a good decade, but I'm not 100% sure. I was the youth services librarian before I did that. I've been at the library for 27 years.
Well, I guess behind that question is how did they pick a Long Island historian? Or
We always had kind of people who were doing some local history stuff on and off because we already had a vertical files and we had some boxes that were buried in the morass of our basement. So there was always somebody who was doing it, but there was never an official local history person. And the director at the time, who's now retired, she's actually now the village historian. So she's very much into history. So she just decided we really need a department. So I don't know why she picked me, but she decided she thought I would be perfect for it.
And so now 10 years in, how's it going?
Yeah, I think it's doing really well. I've kind of gotten used to it. I actually went back to school to get my archive certificate to make it all official. So I obviously kind of like it.
What interests you about the position? Because research is research, but there's uniqueness about historical. I mean, how did you find your way into it?
I mean, it was rough at start because I had no idea what I was doing. Honestly, I was like, so I started small with just like a little blog. And then I've just expanded more and more into now we have a thriving libguide and all that stuff. And I find it both rewarding and frustrating depending on what I'm looking for.
Talked about the state of or scope of the collections that you have? What type of things have you collected? I know you've digitized a lot, so give us an overview.
We happen to also be kind of lucky. We house in our basement also the Farmingdale Bethpage Historical Society archives. So they've given me basically free reign of those archives. So we have those archives, and then when we have our own specific collections. So it's like a combo of both. So I go back and forth between both of the archives for my displays, for what I digitize. So it's like a little bit of everything.
So what is, well, first of all, what's the level, would you say, of interest from the community?
So I've discovered Farmingdalers love their history. Since I've started posting my blog entries on the local social media page, the hits have doubled, tripled. I get a good at least 700 hits a month on our local history guide. Our New York Heritage does really well too. So they don't leave Farmingdale. They have their kids here and then they have their grandkids here. They've been residents 40, 50, 60 years.
And I see you've got a yearbook collection digitized.
Yes.
That's always an interesting through channel, the people that have gone through high school and the teachers that have taught the students and the children of the students and the chain that you can create.
Yeah, we had them on disc, and then I had the Long Island Library Resource Council has an accessing archivist who will come to your place and kind of help you do stuff. So his name is Robert. He's amazing, Robert Annan.
We're doing a mini series right now, actually, on oral history. So I've met Rob. He's great.
He's amazing. So he spent 6 weeks with me and helped me clean up my personal collection because I didn't even know what I had. They were all just in boxes all over the place. So while he was there, he took the yearbooks that were already digitized and made them pretty and threw them up on New York Heritage. They're a huge hit. I've shared them with the high school and they love it. And then I'm going back and going to the older ones that weren't digitizing them myself and throwing them up on New York Heritage as well.
So in terms of, you have access to all these, and at least my mindset, and I would guess yours is, we could spend hours in that basement hunting down stories and things. So what are some highlights, either you put in a display or a blog post, is something you uncovered about Farmingdale history that you think people might not know?
Yeah, it's not even about the history. It's just these little nuggets that you find. I just recently, while we were going through a box, his name is Dr. Albert Meyerstein. He was actually on the school physician. He was on the library board. And as we were looking through he gathered all this great information, but he happened to have 2 letters that weren't in English. They were in German. And we kind of, after finding somebody who could translate it, they were letters from a prisoner of war to him in World War II, which is phenomenal. And then I also didn't realize we had, and then I stumbled upon them and I've digitized them and I'm slowly transcribing them, these amazing indenture deeds from the late 1700s from Farmingdale residents. So we made sure that they got better preserved, and I've digitized them all. And as I transcribe them, I'm putting them up on New York Heritage too. So those have been really interesting to look at because you're holding something from like 1786.
So those original documents found their way into your collection?
Yeah, I don't know how, but we've have them, and they're up off the floor, so they're nice and preserved.
And just I can imagine the texture of the paper even from back then. They must feel different than anything.
They look different. They feel different. They have that color, the different coloration. The cursive on it is definitely, that's why it takes me long, because the cursive is a little rougher from the 1700s than it is now. So some of the words I'm like, I don't know what that says. So there's sometimes a few blanks when I really can't figure it out. But it's really neat. And it's usually somebody selling a piece of land from one person to the next. But the way they describe where their land is, it's like by Jacob's tree on Jacob Mott's property to the creek on this guy's property. They don't name roads. It's bordering other people's property, and that's how they tell you where this land is that they're selling from one to the other.
So in terms of research, is there a big mystery in your mind? Like what is an unknown part that you're looking to fill the gaps? Either you don't have it in the collection or something that happened that you haven't figured out.
There's a few that I just can't get like enough information on, either because it wasn't in the paper or, it used to exist and then we can't find it. There was they called it the Bethpage Social Club. It was basically the KKK. And there was an oral history when somebody was talking about it, but that cassette cannot be found. I mean, maybe I'll dig it up because I haven't gone through every single nook and cranny but there's not a lot of information on it. And so there's always something like that, or really about the older, like the early times of Farmingdale. There's just not a ton of information. I've been kind of starting early about, the Revolutionary War times, and I'm not really finding anything.
And this might be beyond the scope of your job, but in terms of the physical preservation of landmarks in Farmingdale, what's the state of preservation, would you say? Are there at least some older houses that you can point to that are landmarked or designated?
There's two. One actually just got recently landmarked within the last decade. Abigail Leonard, her house just got landmarked from the Historical Society. She was a retired teacher from Brooklyn that moved to Farmingdale. She founded the Farmingdale Women's Club, and she helped actually found us. She was one of the people who created the library, so her house is preserved. And then the founder of Farmingdale, Thomas Powell, his house is preserved, and the village just actually recently purchased it. So they just got a grant, and they're hoping to put money into doing work on the house and making it more of a museum. So that's kind of really exciting.
And I came across this, I forget which record it was, but it seems like your first librarian there was actually Marion the librarian. There was a Marion. She
got paid. Her father forbade her to get paid. So she was given a briefcase as consolation. Yeah.
So you mentioned oral histories, and Rob and I are in the middle of detailing some of the work he's done with that. But so at Farmingdale, it looks like you've done, and you personally have done some projects. Do you want to describe what you've been doing with oral history?
So we have 3 sets. One I didn't do. I just happened to stumble upon. The Historical Society did a bunch of oral histories back in the day, a lot of them around the bicentennial. So we have digitized all those. I've cleaned them up, and then I put them online. And then my colleague, who's not part of local history anymore, but she's still here, Tony Ann, and I decided we wanted to do some. So we started with the Veterans History Project, which is through the Library of Congress. You interview veterans. So we interviewed a lovely set of gentlemen. 2 of them we were blessed to get before they passed. They were World War II vets. So they were amazing. And then we were like, oh, this is going so well. We really love doing this. Why don't we expand it? And we started what we call Farmingdale Voices, where we interview long-term Farmingdale residents and get their stories about what they remember about Farmingdale. And our very first person was 94. So she had a lot of stories to tell.
That's always great. Yeah. Were you doing that audio only, or were you videotaping too?
We only do audio. And so then once we finish the audio, then we transcribe it. And if they give us any pictures, we, add the pictures, and then it goes up on New York Heritage. It's fun to do. I do love talking to these people. One or two of them I knew as regular patrons, so it was a little easier. And I find just doing it with a microphone, they can kind of forget the microphone is there because we're just sitting next to each other, like across from each other, having a conversation. I don't think they would be as relaxed and open with a video camera there.
So one thing where I thought I saw an overlap, I'd done an oral history project on World War II, but it was the Long Island home front. So we were interviewing people about their experiences living and working on Long Island. So what can you say about the war years? I think you've done some talks on this in Farmingdale in the 30s and 40s.
Yeah, I just recently actually did a talk for the Historical Society about Farmingdale during World War II, and it was really interesting because the community everybody was just worked together. They set up specific houses that if something happened, the kids could just go to that house and they would watch over the children until the parents came and got them. They had a watchtower in one of the buildings at SUNY Farmingdale, and people would just, hang out together and watch for planes. And just the town just all came together. They had the victory gardens. They did a lot of our Red Cross was phenomenal. I've just recently, working with Robert, found their minute meetings from that time period. And the amount of items that they created for the war effort was absolutely mind-blowing. So it was really interesting to see how much they remembered and how much they were just all together, working together to support the local boys.
Yeah, I came across a few stories of the plane spotting, and I met a former shop teacher from Blue Point High School, and he was telling me that when he first started in the 70s, in the basement of the school were cut out planes that the students during wartime had cut out profile silhouettes of different planes as a project to help identify, Japanese bombers and things as part of their schoolwork in the 40s.
Yeah, and I think it didn't hurt that we had about 3 or 4 working airplane factories at the time here in Farmingdale. So I think, so many people were working in these factories. I think it kind of tied that all in.
Yeah, no, that's a perfect segue because I was going to bring that. So as the aviation history of the area goes back pretty far, do you want to name some of those companies and sort of how they got there?
Yeah, so we had a few that were long and a few that were short. We had like Sperry. I think it ended quickly because unfortunately the person his plane crashed and he died. But then we also had Grumman for a little bit before they went to Bethpage. They were here in Farmingdale. And then we had Republic Airline, which became Fairchild, and then which I think are still existent. And then we had Liberty. So we had a bunch of airplane factories, and then there were offshoots of all of them. So there was this Ranger aircraft and American aircraft and all these other smaller offshoots of the bigger aircraft companies.
And so these would have been initially, I guess, civilian outfits and then changed to wartime production. And so they were there early cradle of aviation time.
Yeah, they all kind of hung, they kind of founded in the 20s and then, hit big, obviously, in the 40s.
So how, from what you've seen or heard or researched, what was the impact of them leaving or as those companies folded?
Yeah, it was a little, I know Grumman was a big one when they left, but it was luckily not too bad because they only moved to Bethpage. So some people just moved over. Republic was the big one because that's now Republic Air, Plaza. It's a shopping center that they had their own train station. They were that big. And so I think when it closed, it didn't close for a while. It was very rough. It didn't close until the 80s.
And is Republic still an active airport?
It is. It's a private airport, so it's smaller planes. But right attached to it is the American Air Power Museum. So they house some of the historic planes, and for some of those air shows, that's where the planes land.
Oh, okay. So like the Jones Beach shows.
They used to. I don't know if they do it as much anymore, but they have landed there. So you would see the Blue Angels and stuff there. But they have this one thing. I don't know how much it costs, but you can become like a World War II pilot and you get suited up and you go into one of their bombers and they take you up in the air and fly.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Would you ever do that? Is that
Oh
on there on
yeah,
your-
and I want to do it one of these years for my birthday. I'm just like, I'm gonna do it. And the gentlemen who work there, they're all volunteers, but they're all veterans, so they will sit and tell you about the planes there for hours if you want to. They know they flew them, so they know what they're doing.
Yeah, and it's amazing how much of this is still in some people's living memory. That's what I like about oral history is if you catch the right people at the right time, you're bottling this kind of memory before it's gone.
Exactly. We about 2 years ago, we get this phone call from the people at Grumman. They're like, "Yeah, we're emptying out one of the few offices that were left in Farmingdale, and we have these great photographs. Do you want them?" Okay, no, yeah, sure. Like, why would we say no?
Yeah.
We're going to say yes, please, thank you. So we got this amazing, huge panorama of the entire staff of Grumman while it was in Farmingdale in 1933. So we have a big display downstairs. So I do all the aviation companies every few months, and that's one of the first pictures that goes up.
Nice. So do you find, going back to the local interest, is that a big part of the local identity or that history of the aviation?
That and a lot of there's certain stores that everybody you can mention that store to any longtime Farmingdale resident and they'll just tell you a memory of that store. There's like usually two specific ones that they'll be like, and they'll go right into some memory of Stern's Pickle Works, which was a pickle factory, and they sold pickles. And a 5 and 10 store called McClellan's. If you name those two to any long-term Farmingdale resident, they will have a story about one of those two stores.
I saw some of the pictures of the pickle trucks. How extensive was that factory? Was that like fields of?
When I look at the pictures, it wasn't that big, but he was one of those people. We have letters when people would ask him for recipes, he would write them back and give you the recipe how to make the pickles. He kind of knew a lot of people. He was really big in we had a Farmingdale Jewish Center here. I think he was one of the people who helped make that happen. He just was very involved in the community. So I think that didn't hurt that so many people just knew him and then loved the pickles. I heard they were amazing. I never got a chance to have them, unfortunately.
So in terms of engaging the community, what kind of events, or you mentioned social media, what have you tried and what were some of your successes, would you say, in terms of getting people either through the doors or just to pay attention to your collections?
So we've done a few things. I have the ongoing guide so that they all know about. Anytime I make a blog post, and usually sometimes the blog post isn't necessarily Farmingdale history, I'll do something Long Island based. I post it on the social media page. And then they look at it, obviously, based on my statistics. We have a display of sorts. It's bigger than a display, but it's in the library. And if it's between the nonfiction stacks and you walk down and it's basically Main Street then and now. So it's pictures of buildings on Main Street, what they look like then, what they look like now, and then information about both buildings, when they were founded, who founded them, as much as information as we could gather. And then we have an ongoing project of what was on Main Street when. So up until that point, all the other places that were at that address. So you could literally walk down the stacks and you're walking down Main Street. And we attached 1 or 2 oral histories to some of the panels if they link it. So we have a picture of the fire department, and when there's an oral history about the history of the fire department linked to it. And then recently, about 2 years ago now, we got a grant through the Long Island Library Resource Council to do a walking tour app. So they can now go around Main Street and a little off Main Street and take a tour of what Farmingdale was like then.
I didn't ask you this. Are you from Long Island, or what's your history?
I am. I grew up in 2 towns over in Massapequa.
Growing up, how aware were you of Massapequa history, or were you interested in old
I
things?
knew bits and pieces, but I found out more as I got older. And then when I was in library school, I took a special libraries class, so we had to kind of talk about a special library. So I did the Floyd Jones Library in Massapequa. So I really learned about the Jones family and Massapequa and more of its history in library school. But I knew bits and pieces just growing up there, but not the nitty gritty. And now I'm finding more because so much of Farmingdale, Massapequa, and Bethpage, they're all kind of intertwined with each other. So I'll find little nuggets of Massapequa history when I'm looking for Farmingdale stuff.
And I'm curious or at least for your area, do local history librarians talk to each other? I know there's a Lillwick Council maybe, but how much interplay do you have with your colleagues there?
So it's the Preservation for Long Island History. I'm one of the committee members. And then we have an ongoing Google group where it's local history librarians and historical societies are also on it. So you can ask each other questions or, hey, we did something cool. So that's always active. We're kind of all like an email away. So if you need something, I didn't know anything when I started. So one of the first meetings I went to for a local history or genealogy thing, there was a librarian, Regina Feeney, who's the librarian and archivist at Freeport, and she's also the historian. She's become my mentor. So even when I did my internship for archive school, I interned with her.
That's great.
So she's always been a great help, and she's given me even my newest program I kind of borrowed from her that I've done, that I started doing here at the library. So I kind of call her most of the times if I'm stuck. But I'll ask questions to any. I have names, so if I find something in our archives that might not necessarily belong to Farmingdale, I'll call them and be like, hey, do you want this? So, because we're a small breed, there's not a lot of us out there, so we kind of all know each other.
Well, and what's great is a lot of the people I've interviewed Regina and a few others, but I talked to a lot of historians from other fields who have used your collection. So it's always great to see people that come to research a certain person or the KKK, or, they'll be looking through your maps and say, your customers in a sense. You're serving them very well because they all coming up with great research from those.
Oh, thank you. Well, I try, and lately I've been doing some programs for the public. I do mostly genealogy-based programs, how to use family search, how to, genealogy 101, but I just started one that I borrowed from Regina. She calls it Murder and Mayhem. I renamed it Mischief and Mayhem. And I sent her on usually try in Farmingdale, but sometimes it's just Long Island historical crime. And I go down the rabbit hole of the crime and the court case. And so all those true crime aficionados come. So I did one so far, and I have another one coming up.
Is there anything about your work or Farmingdale or the collection that I didn't ask you that you want to get across?
I mean, I'm just so impressed by all the amount of information that exists that I didn't even know about until I stumble upon it. So I'm always loving the fact that I can find something new every time. I have a folder of my ongoing people to look up or things to look up that catch my eye. So I'll take a note. They'll be looking in the paper for one thing, something else will catch my eye. I jot a quick note about it, throw it in the folder, and then I get to it and I'm like, oh, when I do the research, that's so cool. And it's never dull.
And a big thank you to Natalie and the great work she's doing at the Farmingdale Public Library. You can find links to their pages and to related resources in our show notes. That's at longislandhistoryproject.org. And as a bit of a teaser, one thing we didn't include in the interview, Natalie is also involved in editing the Farmingdale Library's podcast, which is Beyond the Rotunda, hosted by Kevin Schultz. And I am looking forward to, in the not-too-distant future, sitting down and being a guest. It'll be interesting to be on the other side of the mic, but look for further updates about the library podcast Beyond the Rotunda. If you're a local history librarian and you'd like to talk about your work, why don't you drop us a line? We're at longislandhistoryproject@gmail.com. We'd love to hear more about what secret stories you've got, interesting programming. I'm sure you've all got pickle factories of your own, so get in touch. That does it for another episode. Our outro music is Capering by the Blue Dot Sessions, used under an Attribution 4.0 international license. And as always, thank you for listening.